Song Kang's bold confession for Kim Yoo Jung stuns fans. Love turned into promise. What happens when a confession meant for one person shakes an entire nation? In front of flashing cameras and stunned reporters, Song Kang uttered three words that no one expected. "She's mine." The crowd froze. The internet exploded, and within hours, the love story that once lived only in fan dreams suddenly felt real. Was it spontaneous passion, or the beginning of a lifelong promise? The truth behind that moment is even more breathtaking than anyone imagined. Let's uncover it together, right now. With red carpet revealed. The night it happened, the world held its breath. It was the 37th Aurelia Entertainment Awards. Broadcast live across 3 continents. The air shimmered with spotlights, the audience glowed in sequins and polished smiles. At the center of it all stood Kang, the industry's favorite mystery, the kind of actor who never said more than necessary. He had the reputation of someone who carried storms behind his calm eyes. When the host asked about his ideal type, everyone expected another practice line, a diplomatic shrug, maybe a joke. Instead, Kang looked toward the front row. His jaw tightened. Then, softly, he said, "She's here tonight." The cameras panned instinctively, and found Yoo Jung, sitting near the aisle in a moon-silver gown, eyes wide. Kang's lips curved into the faintest smile. "She's mine." The hall froze. Then came a wave of gasps, shouts, the electric crackle of disbelief. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Yura's hand rose to her chest as if to calm her heart. The orchestra missed a cue. The host stammered something about unexpected honesty. But Kang didn't flinch. He stood there, still uncertain, as though he had just dropped his truth into the universe and was waiting for gravity to catch up. The live stream exploded. Within minutes, "She's mine" and Kang Yoo confession topped every platform. Fans clipped the moment into endless loops. Comment sections turned into bonfires. By the time the ceremony ended, the internet had rewritten itself around one question: was it real? At 3 a.m., in a quiet hotel hallway lined with wilted bouquets and discarded champagne glasses, Kang leaned against the wall outside his suite. His manager was losing his mind inside the room, 3 phones ringing, statements half-written, publicists shouting through Bluetooth headsets. Kang closed his eyes, letting the chaos hum around him. He hadn't planned the confession. Not like that. The words had just escaped, out by months of silence and late-night rehearsals where truth had nowhere else to go. He still remembered the look on Yura's face, surprise first, then something deeper, something like relief. A knock broke his thoughts. She was standing there, still in her gown, hair slightly undone, clutching a pair of heels. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. "Do you realize what you've done?" she whispered. Kang nodded slowly. "I told the truth." Her sigh was half a laugh, half a sob. This detonated the entire industry. He smiled, weary but certain. "Then let it burn. Maybe something honest will grow from the ashes." The next morning, the sun over Aurelia City looked different, like a spotlight searching for what came next. Every screen, every cafe, every newsstand showed the same headline: "She's mine, Kang Seo's confession shocks the world." Clips replayed endlessly, the pause, the declaration, the stunned reaction. Analysts dissected his body language, lip readers claimed your mouth don't before smiling. Conspiracy threads bloomed. Her agency released nothing. His remained silent. The silence only made the noise louder. By noon, drones hovered over both their apartment buildings. Delivery men pretended to forget orders just to sneak glances. And the mayor joked at a press briefing, "I guess love is trending in Aurelia today." Behind closed curtains, Yura scrolled through the chaos until her hands trembled. When her assistant begged her to switch off the phone, she whispered, "No. I need to see how it breaks." The assistant frowned. "How it breaks?" "The wall we built." She set the phone down. Outside, rain began to fall, light, hesitant drops tapping against the window like questions. She remembered their first meeting 3 years ago on the set of Midnight River. He'd been reserved, precise, almost too professional. She'd been curious, unfiltered, messy in the way that made directors love her and managers panic. They clashed, then laughed. It became inseparable. But Aurelia's entertainment world had rules. Dating rumors were poison, image was everything. They had learned to love through shadows, shared umbrellas, coded text messages. Glances across crowded studios. For 3 years they lived like ghosts of their own affection. Until last night. By evening, Kang's agency finally broke the silence. The statement was short. Mr. CO Kang's words at the O'Reilly Awards were spontaneous and personal. We ask for understanding and respect for all parties involved. It said everything and nothing. Meanwhile, Yura's team cancelled her upcoming fan meeting. That only fueled speculation. Was she angry? Embarrassed? In love? She wasn't sure herself. All she knew was that the truth was out, and that the truth, once spoken, never goes back into hiding. Night, unable to sleep. She drove through the city. Neon signs blurred into watercolor streaks on her windshield. She ended up at the Riverside Park where they used to rehearse lines together under the pretense of extra practice. He was there. Waiting. You shouldn't be out, he said softly as she approached. Neither should you. They stood in silence. The hum of the city around them. Finally, she whispered, why now? He looked up at the flickering skyline. Because waiting started to feel like lying. Her breath caught. He turned to face her. You once told me that love without courage is just longing. I got tired of longing. Rain began to fall again, heavier now, drenching them both. She laughed through the tears. You're impossible. He smiled. Maybe. But you're real. They kissed, not for the cameras. Not for drama, but for survival. Somewhere above them, lightning flashed like applause. The next day, a rumor spread that their agencies were preparing joint statements. Talk shows speculated on wedding bells. Skeptics called it a marketing stunt. But those who watched the footage closely saw something different, the way his hand trembled slightly when he said her name. The way her eyes softened, unguarded. Every love story leaves evidence. Theirs was written in body language. Online, fans began choosing sides, some protective, some celebratory. One viral post read, for once, let's root for love instead of perfection. Even journalists who had made careers out of cynicism found themselves oddly moved. One columnist wrote, perhaps this is what authenticity looks like, messy, inconvenient, but alive. 3 days later, Yura vanished from public view. Her agency claimed she was resting abroad. Paparazzi hunted through airports, rumor accounts tracked flight manifests. Kang, meanwhile, appeared on stage at a small art house premiere for a film he'd finished months before. His hair was still damp from rain. His expression unreadable. When reporters shouted questions, he paused, met the flashing cameras, and said quietly, she's safe. It was the only thing he said before walking away. But those two words echoed louder than any speech. Fans replayed them, dissected them into songs. She's safe. For some reason, it sounded less like reassurance and more like a promise. In the weeks that followed, the noise slowly softened. New scandals replaced old ones. But something about that confession refused to fade. It became part of pop culture folklore, replayed in countdowns, analyzed in documentaries, romanticized in fan fiction. Inside the storm, Kang and Yura built a fragile peace. They met rarely, secretly. Places where no one thought to look, an old rehearsal room, a bookstore cafe that closed early, the rooftop of her childhood apartment. They spoke little, but when they did, it was always the same theme. What happens next? She asked once, tracing circles on his wrist. He smiled faintly. We keep our promise. And if the world doesn't let us, then we make our own world. He looked at her the way he always had, like someone memorizing a moment he never wanted to lose. Outside that small rooftop, life went on, new dramas aired, fans moved on. Agencies spun new headlines. But among those who still believed in them, a quiet movement began, fans posting photos of constellations captioned promise not perfection. It was strange, the way love stories evolve. Started as scandal became a symbol of courage. Yet, beneath every rumor, every replayed clip, one truth remained untouched. The night he said, she's mine. He wasn't claiming her. He was claiming the right to feel, the right to exist honestly in a world built on make-believe. Months later, they both returned to public life. Yura accepted a role in a minimalist film about silence and memory. Kang began directing his first project. Critics called it a love letter to vulnerability. During the press conference, someone asked him if the film was inspired by personal experience. He smiled. All stories are. And, almost as an afterthought, he added, some stories write you back. That line trended for days. On the anniversary of the Aurelia Awards, fans gathered again, replaying that famous confession on giant outdoor screens. And the clip ended. They noticed something new, a different kind of glow in his eyes they had missed before. Not defiance, not guilt. Peace. Because behind the camera, somewhere out of frame, Yura had been smiling. And that smile, like the confession, changed everything. 4 months after the night of the confession, the city that had once roared with noise seemed to breathe slower. The reporters left the street corners. Drones disappeared from the sky. The world had moved on, or so it looked from the outside. But inside that quiet, two people were still learning how to exist again. Kang and Yura were finally free. But freedom is heavier than it looks. Fame had carved reflexes into them, the instinct to hide, to smile, to say nothing when hearts were screaming. Now, the script of secrecy. They had to relearn everything, how to speak, how to be seen, how to love with the lights still on. The first time they appeared in public together again, it wasn't planned. A rainstorm had broken over Aurelia City, forcing them into a small corner cafe near the river. There were no managers, no cameras, only the smell of espresso and the soft hum of jazz. Yura wore a gray hoodie, Kang's hair was still damp from the rain. They looked like any two people trying to stay warm. An old man behind the counter recognized him. For a moment he hesitated, then only smiled and said, "You both look tired. Sit near the window. The light there is kind." They did. And in that little act of kindness, in them unclenched, Yura reached across the table, fingertips brushing his. For a moment, she whispered, "It feels normal." He smiled. "Normal's overrated." "Maybe," she said. "But I'd still like to try it." Outside, the rain blurred the glass until the world looked like a painting, and for the first time in years, they weren't the ones being watched. Weeks later, Kang began filming his new project, his first time behind the camera instead of in front of it. The script was simple: two people meet, lose each other, and find their way back through letters never sent. Called it Echoes of You. On the first day of shooting, Yura visited the set unannounced. She stood quietly at the edge of the soundstage, watching him direct with a focus she'd never seen before. When he finally noticed her, he grinned like a boy caught daydreaming. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "I'm just here to see if you still remember how to smile." He walked over, brushing dust off his jacket. "You always did show up when I started forgetting." Later, in his director's notebook, he scribbled, "She doesn't interrupt the silence, she completes it." That night, under the faint glow of the studio lights, he realized he'd been filming the same story he'd been living. Yura's life was changing too. She had signed on to a small independent film, playing a woman who learns to hear again after years of silence. The role demanded rawness, no makeup, glamour, only truth. The critics would later call it her most human performance. In the late-night rehearsal, her co-star asked how she managed to summon such quiet pain. She smiled sadly. "It's not acting. It's remembering." He didn't press further. Some memories don't need explanations. Months passed. Their lives stopped feeling like headlines. They became ordinary in the best way: grocery lists, missed calls, half-finished breakfasts. After that echoed through rooms too big for two. They learned to fight over small things: music volume, misplaced socks, and to forgive before sleep. For every argument, there was always a return, a hand reaching across a pillow, a whispered "I'm still here." Love isn't a grand gesture, it's simply staying. In late spring, Kang's film premiered at the Crescent Film Festival. The audience expected artistry. They received was honesty. The final scene, a letter read aloud over the sound of ocean waves, left the theater silent. The credits rolled, and still no one moved. During the Q&A, a journalist asked you if the movie was autobiographical. Kang looked toward Yura, sitting near the front row, and said, "Every film I make is about someone I love, even if she doesn't realize it." The crowd applauded, unaware of how personal that line truly was. Afterward, Yura waited for him in the empty hallway. "That ending," she said softly. "Really the ocean we visited?" He nodded. "Same horizon, different truth." She smiled. "Then you finally found your ending?" Head. "No. I just found the courage to start again." Summer arrived with a smell of rain and sea salt. They escaped to Jeju, where no one called them by name. They rented a small cottage with a wooden deck and painted the walls themselves. Every evening, they watched the sunset melt into gold across the waves. On the last night of July, Yura found him on the beach, writing something in the sand. "What are you doing?" she called out. Straightened, brushing sand from his hands. "Trying to make a promise." She laughed. "In sand. It's not about how long it lasts," he said. "It's about meaning it while it does." He stepped closer, eyes reflecting the twilight. "I can't promise forever," he said. "But I can promise every day until forever arrives." She didn't answer, just slipped her hand into his. Sometimes silence says everything. Back in Aurelia City, they faced the world again, press, premieres, interviews. But this time, they faced it together. When reporters tried to provoke gossip, they smiled and redirected. When fans shouted "Stay strong" outside studios, they waved back, no longer hiding. Their openness didn't end the curiosity, but it changed its flavor. Instead of scandal, people saw sincerity. Instead of a chaos, they saw calm. A columnist wrote, "They turned a confession into a compass. Every move since has pointed toward truth." One evening, Kang appeared on a late-night talk show. The host, half teasing, asked, "So, Director CO, you still believe she's yours?" Kang chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "She never was mine," he said. "It's hers, I just didn't know how to say it back then." The audience erupted in applause. Clips of that moment flooded social media. But beneath the jokes and headlines, there was something deeper, the collective sigh of people who had grown up believing love and fame couldn't coexist, and now saw that maybe they could. By winter, the rumor mills turned towards something else entirely, whispers of a wedding. Neither confirmed nor denied. Yet on New Year's Eve, an anonymous photographer captured a quiet image, two figures on a balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching fireworks bloom over the river. Their faces half lit, their hands entwined. The photo went viral not for its proof, but for its peace. It looked less like a secret and more like a prayer answered. After the night that changed everything, the Aurelia Awards returned. Kang was nominated again, this time for Best Director. The hall shimmered with memories. When his name was announced, the crowd roared, but what silenced them was his speech. He stepped to the microphone, holding the trophy loosely. "Last year, I spoke without thinking," he began. "Tonight, I've had plenty of time to think. All I can say is, thank you. Not for forgiving me, but for understanding that honesty isn't chaos. It's clarity." He turned toward the front row. "And to the one who taught me that truth can be gentle, you know who you are, thank you for letting me find you twice." Cameras flashed. Yura blinked away tears. Watched two people who had learned that love doesn't always need declarations. Sometimes, it just needs endurance. To the ceremony, they slipped away from the crowd to the same rooftop where everything once began. The city pulsed below, alive with noise and light. "Do you ever miss the silence?" Yura asked. Kang smiled. "Only until you speak." Resting her head on his shoulder. "You and your poetic lines. And you started it." For a while they said nothing, watching the city breathe. Somewhere far below, board replayed that old moment from a year ago, his confession, her stunned smile. They watched it flicker and fade. Reached for her hand. "Funny, isn't it? How one sentence can change a life?" To him. Not just one life. The wind carried the faint echo of laughter and applause from the streets below, the same city that once judged them now cheering them quietly from afar. It felt like closure. It felt like beginning. In interviews years later, when asked what he remembered most about that chaotic time, Kang always answered the same way. The moment after the confession, when everything went quiet. "I realized that if she smiled, I'd be fine." And she did. Yura, for her part, wrote a short essay in a literary magazine titled The Shape of Truth. In it, she said, "Love taught me that some storms don't destroy, they cleanse. And that courage is simply the heart remembering itself." Words ended up engraved on a small bench overlooking the Aurelia River, a place where people now sit, take photos, and whisper wishes of their own. Years passed. They kept their promise, to live simply, to love quietly, to never let fear write their story again. Sometimes, passers-by spotted them in bookshops, flower markets, or walking their dog near the river at dawn. They rarely spoke to the press anymore. They didn't need to. The confession had become legend, the rest was life. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, they returned to the same awards hall, not to relive the chaos, but to remember the beginning. They would sit near the back, hand in hand, unseen among the glitter. When the lights dimmed, Kane would whisper the same line, half joking, half serious. "She's mine." And Yura would smile, sighing softly, "We're ours." The applause always drowned them out. But maybe that was the point. Love didn't need volume anymore. It had become the quiet heartbeat beneath the city's endless noise. No one can predict how long love lasts. But sometimes, a single honest moment, spoken from the heart, can outlive every headline, every whisper, every passing year. And Yura, that moment began with 3 reckless words. The world called it a confession. They called it the beginning of truth. And as the city lights glimmered across the river, painting gold over everything they had survived, it was clear that love, real, fragile, human love, had turned not into a scandal, to a promise kept. Some stories aren't meant to end, they simply soften into quiet echoes that live inside those who believed in them. This was one of those stories. Everyone who read until the final line. Thank you for walking through the noise, the storm, and the silence. Thank you for believing that love can still be brave, that truth can still be gentle. May this story remind you that honesty is the most beautiful language. And that somewhere out there, 2 hearts are still finding each other beneath the lights. Thank you for reading. Written with love, faith, and the courage to feel.